morning. I'm glad to see everybody here on this cold winter is coming day. It is not my favorite thing in the world, but it's a nice day. I'm glad everybody's here and that you've joined us for part 3 of a 5-part series that we are calling Uncommon. Now, in this series, we've been looking at this one big kind of key idea, and that is that common relationships are possible, but not probable. Common relationships are possible, but they're not probable. That's kind of the big idea through this whole series. A couple weeks ago, we talked about uncommon love, and last week we talked about uncommon commitment. Today we're going to be talking about our words, uncommon communication, and how our words impact our relationships. Now here's the thing. Again, the big idea for this series is that uncommon relationships are possible, but not probable. And the reason that we believe they're possible, not probable, is that there's 2 different ways to do relationships. The first way is what we would call the common way of doing relationships, or the world's way of doing relationships, if you that way. So basically that would be just kind of the commonly accepted way to do relationships. The problem is that way doesn't work very well. And that's why our world is so full of broken relationships and broken marriages and things like that. But there's also a different way to do relationships that we would call the uncommon way to do relationships. And that way is God's way. And it works. The problem is that most people don't know what it is. And so during this series, we've been kind of trying to identify, like, what's the normal way of looking at relationships? What's the normal way we do relationships, or the common way? And maybe what's different about God's way of doing relationships? And how can we do those things so that we can have healthy, vibrant, life-giving relationships? Now, this series has kind of been tailored toward marriages because we know that's one of the biggest areas where people struggle in relationships. But the reality is these principles hold true for any relationships that you could have. Anything, parents to kids, kids to parents, friendships, anything. God's principles for relationships can really change things. So today we're talking about words. We're talking about communication. Now I'm a words guy. That's kind of what I do. Is talk and come up with content, and just words are kind of what I do. I feel like God's gifted me in this area, but the problem is that anytime you have a gift or have an ability to do something well, you also have an ability to do that thing and use it for bad things. And so for me, this is a little bit of a convicting message. I have a tendency to use words positively and sometimes use words too negatively. And so this is something very convicting for me in particular. But the reason this is such a huge problem in our world today is that we live in a world that just doesn't care about the words that they speak. And to be honest, I think that the last maybe, 6 or 8 weeks have been the most, have been the most evidence of this that I've ever seen. It is unbelievable to me how people in our world just use words carelessly, flippantly, to destroy other people. And I say like the last 6 or 8 weeks because that's really when things for this past Tuesday, started heating up. Now, I'm not going to stand here and make any political statements because they don't do anybody any good. But here's what I'll say. Over the last 6 to 8 weeks, I have watched people that I know personally just destroy other people that I know. Like, say the most crazy things. There was I was following a Facebook thread this week, which how many of you know right now that's dangerous to do? But I was following a Facebook thread this week, and I have these couple pastor friends who, the one of them was trying to understand the perspective of some people who were on the other side of the political spectrum from him, and so he was asking some questions. And at one point, this other pastor friend of mine weighed in and made what you could probably consider a somewhat snarky comment. It wasn't over the top. It really wasn't too bad, but it was just there was a little bit of a jab in there. And a few comments down from that, I saw a lady who I don't know post in response to the second pastor who had made the little snarky comment. And she said in her comment, such and such, your dad would be ashamed of you if he could see this right now. Knowing full well this guy's dad died when he was 15 years old. And I read this comment and I had this moment of oh my, who are we? Like, who are we as people that this lady thought it was fair game to say, shame on you, your dead father would be ashamed of you for making a comment on Facebook? It's completely and totally insane. I think part of that's the relative anonymity of being able to kind of hide behind a keyboard. But we live in this world that just feels like you can just sling words and destroy humans without ever even considering the implications. Now, we all grew up hearing the phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, right? Like, did your parents teach you that? Trying to help make you tough? And so for those moments when somebody hurls an insult at you, you'll be okay, but we all know that's just a lie. It's absolutely not true. I mean, I know in my own life, there are words that people spoke over me. I mean, as young as like maybe 7 or 8 years old, that those words just stuck in my soul. Like words that over time helped shape positively and negatively at times my identity throughout my life. Some of those are words that still at times like they get whispered in the back of my ear. Honestly, it might seem a little bit odd to you. But being up here, like I love doing this. I love speaking. I love telling people about Jesus. But almost every week, not almost, every single week, as I'm preparing the message for the week and as I'm studying and as I'm working hard to get something for you, there's voices that whisper in the back of my head. You're not good enough to do this. And there are words that people spoke over me at different periods of time in my life just to say, hey, you're not good enough. You're not worthy to do this. Who do you think you are? Because words stick. Words matter. Words have the power to shape our identities for positive or for negative. And again, the problem is we just live in this world that, frankly, it seems like anymore just doesn't care. It's almost as if people have come to this place where when we use words, it's almost as if we forget that there's a person that those words are going to, that there's a human being made in the image of God. So this is just a massive problem. It seems to me that it's becoming increasingly more so. And so what I want to do today is help us first, because if we're going to change our communication so that we can be people who communicate in an uncommon way, then first I need us to think about the way we think about words. I want to help us kind of identify maybe some ways we think about communication and how those can shape the words that we use. So the last few weeks, I've kind of given you some definitions of common love and uncommon love and common commitment and uncommon commitment. Today, I'm not going to do that. I kind of those based on my own experience. This week, we're going to turn to some experts. These are some principles that some researchers who have studied communication years and years have come up with. So what I want to do is show you, first of all, 4 levels of communication that every human has in their life. The first one is surface communication. Surface, and this one's in your notes if you want to write that down, surface communication. This is kind of the base level of communication. At this point, there's no conversation really happening. This is like, hey, how are you? Good, and you? Sometimes it's just like a head nod or something like that. Just very surface level. There's not anything deep happening here. Digital communication, I think, has made this more normal. When Twitter came about, I remember when Twitter kind of became big, I just remember thinking like, why on earth does anyone want to know 140 characters of what's going on in my life? What? 140, what purpose does this serve? But Twitter kind of made these quick snippets normal, this just surface level kind of stuff. The second level moves a little bit deeper than that, and that is general information. General information. Again, these are not things that I've identified. This is researchers who are saying these are the 4 levels. General information. Now, for some of you, this is probably where a lot of your relationships live. Frankly, probably for most of us, this is where most of our relationships live. So this is just passing off information. Unfortunately, for some people, this may be actually where your marriage and your home communication lives. This is like, hey, Johnny has a test today. I'm going to be home late from work. It's just general information, just passing along stuff from one person to another. We're not going any deeper. But the reality is that good, uncommon communication that changes our relationships has to go deeper. So the third level of communication, they've identified as deep feelings. Deep feelings. Now, so I'm gonna be real honest with you guys. Those of you who've been around a little bit, I don't have any problem picking on myself. I'm gonna pick on myself a little bit. This is not my strength. Getting to this point is not my strength. I'm a moderately emotional guy, but I just, for the most part, I'm even-keeled and like, everything should be good all the time. I don't do the best job at this. So, guys, I'm going to help you out a little bit if you're like me and teach you the 4 most romantic words that you can say to your spouse. The 4 most, okay? This is it. What happened next? That's 3 words. And then what happened? Let's do it that way. And then what happened? That's the form. And after your wife goes, wait, you want to know more? You can pick her up off the floor. You can continue the conversation. It'll be a good day. That's funny. Some of you are like, some of the women are really smiling right now, and the guys are like, huh? So just check on that later. And then what happened? You got to move to a deeper place. Surface level communication and general information does not make a strong relationship. You got to move to a deeper place of deep feelings. Now, here's the thing. The problem with this is that feelings aren't always right, but they're always real. Feelings are not always right, but they're always real. And so what we as people need to come to a place of understanding is that when someone else feels something, particularly people in our lives who are important to us, it doesn't matter if we understand. It doesn't matter if we think they're right or wrong. It matters that they feel it. That's it. Feelings are reality for the people having the feelings. In fact, in a lot of cases, the people who have those feelings and have those emotions, they even know the way they feel isn't right, but they still feel it. Now, this plays itself out in our marriage all the time. Like I said, I'm pretty even-keeled. My wife is a lot more emotional. Now, there are times where this is a really good thing. For instance, my children, my son, who is 19 months old, has started climbing. And we have this bookcase that all of our toys are on, and he's trying to figure out how to scale it. Now, my natural reaction is, he'll be all right. If it falls on him, he won't do it again. That's a bad reaction, right? My son might die. My wife's reaction is, oh, he's gonna die. And so we tend to kind of play this balancing act of like, I just kind of am like, it's gonna work out. And she thinks that everyone is going to die at every second of every day. This is interesting sometimes, but the reality is there are a lot of times where she's having these like moments of anxiety and panic of like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And she knows that that's not really the right way to feel, but it's still reality in that moment. And over time, I think, I'm not going to look at her when I say this, I think I've learned to do a little bit better with that, of just coming to a place where I'm not trying to correct her and tell her, hey, like you're wrong, like what are you doing? You're crazy, because that never does any good. And for people who feel a lot, for people who are very emotional, being corrected is the worst thing you can do. And so coming to a place of expressing deep feelings in a relationship is scary for people, because you don't want to be corrected. You don't want to be told you're wrong, because you're not wrong. You can question facts, but not feelings. And when you can come to a place of deep feelings in a relationship, it really changes the dynamics. But that is not even the highest level of communication that you can have, according to these researchers. The highest level, or the fourth level, is what they call deep needs. Deep needs. Now, unfortunately, most relationships never get to the point where they're here. But the greatest relationships are those that have this level of communication, because at the point at which you understand and serve each other's needs, everything else kind of takes care of itself. This is where a lot of joy and a lot of just peace can happen in relationships, when you know that you're understood by another person, when you know that that person has your best interests at heart, and when they're serving your needs. Now, this is difficult, right? Like I give those levels and I'm like, man, I'm bad at this. I'm bad at this. Naturally, I'm not good at it. And some of these same researchers have also identified what they would say are 4 barriers to communication. So again, these are researchers who have come up with this, but these are the 4 things that keep us from ever getting deeper in our levels of communication. The first thing that they identify is what they call withdrawal. Withdrawal. This is the first level. It just shuts the communication down immediately. The more common way of saying it would be that this is the silent treatment. And some of you are very familiar with the silent treatment. I am bad at the silent treatment. I'm really bad at it because I'm a words person. But this just shuts down communication immediately. This can be emotional. It can be physical. There's a story I heard one time of a guy who he and his wife were fighting, and as happens sometimes, the guy was sick of it. He was sick of it. So he said, I'm just going to give her the silent treatment. He stops talking to her. And the next day, he had to fly out for a business trip, and his flight was supposed to leave at 5 a.m. And so he didn't, like when you're in the silent treatment, right? Like you never want to be the person that breaks the silent treatment. You got to stay strong. And this guy wanted to stay strong. And so rather than talking to his wife, he left his wife a note on the counter in the bathroom. He went to bed early because it was an early flight, and the note said, I need to leave at 5 a.m. Please make sure I don't miss my flight. Yeah. Yeah. And so the next morning, he woke up promptly at 9 a.m., furious, and rolls over to look for his wife, and he sees a note on his nightstand that said, "Hey, honey, it's 5 a.m." So guys, we're not equipped for these fights. Don't go there. Don't do that. But withdrawal, the silent treatment, this is kind of the first level or the first barrier to communication. The second is what they called escalation. Escalation. This is where tempers start flaring. We start speaking loudly. Now, it's really interesting because, again, guys, I'm going to pick on us quite a bit today, but some researchers have also studied this phenomenon of escalation and found that men in particular, when our heart rate raises above 100 beats per minute, we lose almost all ability to have rational thought. I don't know if you've actually, that's a scientific thing. That doesn't give you an excuse, but it does mean you got to understand, physiologically, when our heart rate raises to that level and our testosterone gets pumping, we lose our ability to think. We become almost, this is maybe an over-exaggeration of it, but we become almost animalistic, we just go into survival mode. We're just trying to win. And it doesn't do a lot of good things for relationships. I don't know about you, but I have rarely had a good outcome in a relationship when I get to that point. It doesn't work, and the biggest reason it doesn't work is because when you get to the point of escalation and you start yelling, you start raising your voice, is that usually what happens is someone will cave. But they don't cave because they actually care about what you're saying. They cave because they're just tired of fighting. And the reality is when you win an argument, but the truth of that doesn't actually sink into each other's hearts, when it's just, all right, I'm just done, then you didn't win at all. All you did is divide your relationship. So escalation is the second level. The third level, or the third barrier to communication that they identified is belittling. Belittling. Now this is where things really start to get dangerous. And the reason is because at the stage of belittling, you've actually made a shift from focusing on issues or feelings to the person. And that is dangerous. It is so, so dangerous. Now, at this point, you're kind of doing this thing where you're like, man, I've lowered myself by being in this fight. So rather than raise myself up and take the high ground, I'm going to bring you down. Really, this is the core of any kind of bullying. It's the core of any kind of people speaking critically. Because really, being critical of other people is an insecurity issue. It's I want to make myself feel better. And this is totally out of control in our world. It's totally out of control. This is what I was speaking about earlier. It's completely out of control. We cannot be people who go there. Reminds me of another story that I think is kind of funny. There was a couple driving in the country, and they were driving by this farm. And they'd been fighting all day, again, silent treatment kind of thing. And so they're driving by this farm, and there's some animals out in the yard. And the guy thinks, hey, I'm gonna get one here. I'm gonna get one. So he says, sees there's some pigs and some cows and some sheep, and he says, hey, relatives of yours? And his wife says, yeah, they're in-laws. So again, men, just don't do it. We're going to lose those things. We ought not try to win. But the fourth level is where things really, really get dangerous. And I'm going to say this, and some of you are going to go, okay, I don't know about all this, but it's true. The reason this fourth level is so dangerous is because some people feel weird about this kind of thing, because the devil gets involved in the process. The devil gets involved in the process. He does. And the fourth level is what they called false belief. False belief. And here's why the devil gets involved in the process. In John chapter 8, Scripture teaches us that the devil, our enemy, is the father of all lies. See, the way that Satan tries to destroy our relationships is by telling us lies that we start to believe and then we use as basis for accusation in our own mind against the other person. This is so, so, so dangerous. It is so dangerous. Because now what you're doing is you're creating things in your mind, or maybe creating things you're starting to believe about the other person, their character, their intentions, that may or may not be true. And as those lies start to seep in, it's hard to get rid of them, because that whisper starts to happen every time a similar situation happens. It gets very, very, very dangerous. Now, I have a job to do today, and that's that I've got to bring some weight to this topic. Because again, as I said at the beginning, we just live in a world where, honestly, people don't think about the words they use. We just live in a world where words are not that important, right? We can just throw them out. We can say we're sorry if we want to, but we don't really think about the other people in this. I've got to try to bring some weight to this because we've become too loose with it. The power of our words is absolutely massive. It's absolutely massive. It's so much bigger than I can express. And if I could say it this way, I believe from Scripture and from my own life, I believe that our words have the power to bring life to people, and our words have the same power to bring death to people. And that might seem overly dramatic. I don't know, but I believe it's true. I want to show you a verse in Matthew. This is Jesus talking. And this is what he says. He says, "But I tell you that everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every empty word they have spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned." Now, this is not one of the more feel-good passages in the Bible, right? Like I read and I read that and I think, like, Jesus, are you serious? Like every word, I'm gonna have to give account. I'm in trouble if that's the case. I'm gonna have to give an account for every idle word, and Jesus says, yeah. Now, if you let the power of the cross and the blood of Jesus cleanse you from that works itself out. But what Jesus is trying to do here is he's trying to bring weight to this topic. He's trying to show people, listen, like, you think your words don't matter, but your words matter. They matter so much. I want to show it to you in a different translation, that same passage from the Message version. I think this is really cool. It says, "Let me tell you something." Again, Jesus talking. "Every one of these careless words is going to come back to haunt you." See, what Jesus knows is that every word we speak, it's like a seed that goes into the ground and starts to germinate and grow. And it's going to produce a fruit, either good or bad. He continues, "There will be a time of reckoning. Words are powerful. Take them seriously. Words can be your salvation. Words can also be your damnation." Here's what I want you to understand today. I hope you feel the weight of that. Like, I hope there's a part of you that goes, well, I might not be in the best shape if that's the case. I hope you feel a tension there, a weight of that, because it's so important that we feel it. And the reason is because every one of us, are all products of the words that have been spoken over us in our life. Every one of us is a product of the words spoken over us. I said at the beginning that, I talked about how sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. There's stuff that people have said to you over the years, maybe carelessly, maybe very intentional. There are words that have stuck in your soul. And my guess is that if we were sitting down, just you and I, and you were being totally honest, you would be able to name faces, name places, and name the specific words that certain people, sometimes positive and sometimes negative, have spoken over you in your life. Because words shape our identities. Now, I've had some people, I've been very fortunate that I've had some people in my life who have spoken some unbelievably, incredibly positive words over me. I've also had some people in my life who have not done that. Now, I have a pretty bad memory, to be honest with you, but I can still remember names and faces. I can remember locations. I can remember some of those words. And every one of us has that power in our lives every day to speak words of life or to speak words of death. Now, what I've learned in my time in ministry is that often the best way to help people, at the end of the day, all I want to do every Sunday morning is help. I want to help you guys get a new perspective on something, maybe think about something in a new way, maybe give you something that on Monday you can start doing that'll change your life forever. And so what I've learned is that often the best way to help people is not to tell people what not to do, because there's a lot of what not to do in this world. But the best way to help people is to say, hey, let me give you some things to do this week to help form some new habits and some new patterns. I'm not interested in you not doing stuff. I'm interested in you doing the right things. And so as we kind of get into our closing part here, I just want to give you a few things, 7 things that you can start doing this week to speak life. There's a quote from George Bernard Shaw. It's in your notes. It says, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Now, I give you that quote for this reason. We go through our lives, most of us, never thinking about the impact of what we're saying on the people around us. We just use words. We're unintentional. And if there's one big word that I hope you get out of today, and this isn't your notes, but I want you to write it in your notes. If there's one big thing I want you to get out of today, it's this. You need to be intentional. intentional with the words you say. You must be intentional. And so these 7 things, I believe, are 7 types of communication we can use just to be more intentional about bringing life to the people around us. If we can begin to start making these things our habits of communication, it can really change our relationships. I think you'll be surprised how much it might fix. The first thing that I want us to try to start doing is speaking, the word is praise. Praise. Now, this isn't praise like praising God, because only He is worthy of that kind of praise. This is praise, if I could say it this way, this is find the good in a person. Find something that they shine in and just highlight it. Man, like highlight it like crazy. You know, I remember there was one time when I was young. I was probably 23. I was at my first job as a youth pastor, and I remember reading in a book, kind of trying to do this for teenagers could be huge. And there was this girl in my youth group who was in 6th grade, and she was a particularly difficult girl to get along with. She came from a very difficult home. She had a hard life, and I knew that. But because she had a hard life, she just acted out all the time. She was just starved for attention, and she drove me crazy. Like, I could get along with almost every kid in my youth group, but this girl, like every week she showed up, I was like, grace, please, grace, be full of grace. And I remember I sat down to write these cards. And what I wanted to do was write cards to every one of the kids in my group and just be able to highlight something specific about them. Not general, because it's easy to highlight general things, right? I wanted to highlight something very specific about her. And I sat at my desk. God, what's the good? Because I don't see it. Like, what's the? And I remember thinking, and finally, like, it hit me. Like, every week when she comes in, she drives me crazy. But she's just like, she's bouncing off the walls happy. And even though it drives me crazy sometimes, there are moments every now and then where she just makes me smile because she's so just full of life. And I remember writing in the card, Kayla, thank you for coming in every week and having so much energy and making me smile. Now, I didn't write making me smile once out of every 12 weeks. But I remember, like, and I meant it. I meant it. And I remember giving her that card. And I remember she opened it and she read it and she started crying. And our relation, I mean, literally, I'm not exact. Our relationship changed forever from that day. Everything I ever asked of her, she listened and she did it, just boom. Because in that moment, I spoke something specific into her life that probably no one had ever spoken to her before. And it changed our relationship forever. She was still crazy and she was still obnoxious. But she listened, and you could tell there was a different level of respect. And honestly, even inside of me, when I wrote those words, it changed my heart toward her too. It was really cool. Be people who speak praise. In Proverbs, it says this. It says, a word aptly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. Gold and silver, we need to speak words over people that are beautiful and that are valuable. Words that are beautiful and words that are valuable. We should be people who always, in all things, seek to add value. Now listen, I'm gonna adults, parents, really adults at all. I was a youth pastor for 8 years. I have a very special spot in my heart for teenagers, particularly middle schoolers. And the reason is because middle school is hard. Like, it's so stinking hard. Now, listen, I know that it's easy sometimes as adults to disregard, especially teenagers. They're just crazy idiot teenagers. And I've met a lot of adults who kind of take that flippant, like, whatever. Listen to me. My life was changed forever by some people who, in the midst of my darkest times, as a 6th, 7th, and 8th grader, spoke words of life over me and told me I was a champion and told me God was going to change the world through me one day. Now, I got to tell you, they probably didn't actually feel like saying those words to me a lot because I was an obnoxious teenager. But they did. They spoke life over me. They chose to look at the good in me, not in the bad. And it changed my life forever. May we always be people who speak life over the next generation, because you never know who in that group God is going to use to change the world one day. Be people that speak life. The second thing that we can do is speak words of thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. Just be grateful. Just be grateful. So like today, when you leave here and you go to have your lunch at whatever restaurant you go to, and you have some server who has probably served like 97 tables already today and is totally frazzled and is probably a single mom working 3 jobs, why don't you just take a minute at some point in there and say, hey, it's the best service I've ever had. You're doing an amazing job. And then give her a tip that backs that up. You'll change her day. She will remember you forever because nobody speaks words of thanksgiving. Be grateful. Just try to say every day, try to say thank you 10 times. It's simple. It doesn't take really any effort. It's simple. Try to say thank you 10 times and watch the world around you change. See, we need to be people who speak things that are not as though they were. I want to say that again because it's massive. We need to be people who speak things that are not as though they were, and they will come to be. In Proverbs, it says the tongue, I've kind of been bringing this out throughout this message, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. And then he kind of switches here. It's a little bit odd. He says, he who finds a wife finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord. Listen, your spouse is what's good, so speak that. Be thankful for the people who are closest to you in your life. Know they are good and bring them life too. The third thing that we can do is be people who speak affection. Affection. Just openly express it. There's a lot of people that can't do this because they've been hurt in their lives. They've had people who they thought loved them that broke them, and now there's an inability almost to speak, I love you. I love you. Listen, this may be the single biggest thing that my parents did right. I didn't tell them I was going to say this. I probably should have. But I know in particular my dad, who's sitting back here, he growing up, my grandpa was a hard man who lived through a hard time. And I can remember Dad telling me growing up, I never heard his dad say he loved him. Never in his whole life. And there has not been one conversation, one day that's gone by ever in my life that my dad hasn't said, Andrew, I love you. I love you. Every day of my life. And it has impacted me more than you can possibly imagine. Be people who openly give affection. A lot of people can't do that because they think they're protecting themselves, but really you're just hurting yourself. The biggest reason that we should do this, honestly, is because God does it to us. In Jeremiah, this is God speaking. He says, I have loved you, my people, with an everlasting love. Speak it. Speak it. Speak it often. Listen, I sometimes like the pastor standing up on the stage, like this is a smaller congregation, and so sometimes there's weird dynamics sometimes. People sometimes look at pastors like they're this removed person. Like, I want to pause for a second. I want to tell you guys, like, this might sound crazy, but I love you guys. Like, I legitimately love you guys. There are very few people in this world, I promise, who think about you less. There are very few people who pray about you, pray for you less. It is a privilege and it is an honor to stand here every week and talk to you guys. It is a privilege, it's an honor. I love this church. And when I say this church, I mean the people. I love you guys. You're incredible people. You've been the most amazing blessing to my life. I'm thankful for you. We need to be people who speak that freely. The fourth thing we can do is be people who speak encouragement. Encouragement. Look, just find somebody discouraged and turn it around. Just find somebody who's discouraged and try to lift them up. Just like there's this one simple goal. Just try to make somebody smile every day. Just try to make somebody smile. In Ephesians 4, it says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. Just what's good for building people up. Everything that comes out of your mouth builds up or tears down. There are no neutral words. Be people who intentionally build up. And if I could give a very brief aside here, listen, there's a word that I want all of us to eliminate from our dictionary altogether. Shame. Shame. Don't say shame on you. Because that's a word that brings some death. Lift people up. Focus on what they do right. The fifth thing we can do is be people who speak kindness. Kindness. This just says, I'm going to create an environment that is harmless, that you can be safe, when you're around me. You can be safe. In Proverbs, again, it says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The sixth thing, we can be people who speak truth in love. Truth and love. Now, it might be easy to hear this big list and be like, so what, you don't ever want us to say anything hard? No, that's not it at all. It's not it. We absolutely have to be people who speak the truth. We have to be people who are willing to call out the people we love when they need called out. But we need to have the proper perspective and the relational equity to do it in a way that doesn't bring them down. Like if you think about it this way, every good word you say to somebody is like you're putting a coin in a bank, in an emotional bank. And there's going to come a moment when you got to make a withdrawal from that bank. But you don't want to make a withdrawal when there's no relational equity in the bank. Speak truth in love. Say what needs said the right way. And maybe the most simple way for me to say this is this. Often as people, we tend to, when we speak the truth, we try to tell people how to live. We try to tell people what they need to do differently. Speaking the truth in love looks like this. Hey, listen, this is not okay, but I trust you, and I trust that you are going to let the Holy Spirit work in your life. I'm not going to tell you how to change. I'm not going to tell you what you need to do different. I'm going to tell you what I think you're doing wrong because I love you, and I'm going to let it be. And I'm going to trust that you are a person of character and integrity who's going to work on it. Speak the truth in love. In Ephesians, it says, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ. We need to show people we trust them by giving them the option to choose how to respond, not controlling them. And then the seventh thing we can do to be people of uncommon relationships and uncommon communication is we need to be people who pray. Prayer is the seventh thing we can do, prayer. Now, this is a very awkward one for some people because some people just prayer is kind of weird. But listen, if you're in the middle of something and you can be big enough to say, hey, let's pause, we need to pray. Everything changes. Everything changes. No matter the situation, prayer helps fix things. It might make you uncomfortable, but your heart will change when you involve God in the process. When you're big enough to say, I'm screwing this up. Before it gets to escalation, I'm screwing this up. We need to bring God into this. Let's pray. Let's get our priorities right. God changes things for you. Every single time, he changes things for you. In the Psalms, the psalmist writes, I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Therefore, my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. Listen, we need to be people of uncommon communication. We need to be people who bring life to the people around us. Every word we speak has the power to bring life and the power to bring death. May we ever be people who are intentional with the words that we use. That in every scenario, in every situation that we have in our lives, that we would think about the words that are coming out of our mouth and how they impact the people around us. I'd like it if everybody would bow your head right where you are. I want us to do this together right now. I just want us to take a minute together and to pray. I believe that, I know, I don't believe it, I know that in a room this size, there are some people who have some wounds in their souls from some words that have been spoken over them over the years. There are some people in this room that have been devastated. Words. And I just want to take a moment and I want us to pray together. And if you're a person who you know, like there's just stuff in you, there are words that have been spoken over you that have destroyed you inside. I just want you to take a minute and create some space for God to heal you. Because he can. And he will if you'll allow him into that space. And I want us to pray together for that. I want us to pray together for the words we've spoken idly. I want us to pray that God would help us be people who are intentional with our words and help heal the hearts of the people that we have hurt. So let's just take a few minutes and let's pray together this morning. God, I thank you for this time. I thank you for your word that gives us the of our shortcomings, that gives us the truth of how the things that we just don't even think about, how they can so dramatically impact the lives of the people around us. God, in this moment, I pray specifically for the people in this room who have been hurt and who have been broken and who have been shattered by the words of people, especially for the people who have been hurt and broken by your people. God, I pray that you would heal those wounds. God, I pray that you would bring forgiveness. I pray that you would bring peace. And God, for those of us, for all of us who have spoken words idly and who have said things that we shouldn't have said that hurt the people around us, God, I pray that you would make us people who speak life always. I pray that you would make us people who are aware constantly of the words we're speaking and how those words are impacting the people around us. I pray that you would make us people who speak life, the same life that you have given to us. May we give it to those around us. Now listen, keep your heads bowed, but listen, none of this is possible on your own power. Like, the reality is that we are people, we are fallen people, we are sinful people. We are not capable of being people who do this just naturally. It's only through the power of God in us that we are able to change and to be people who speak life. The first step to being people of uncommon communication, people who speak life, the first step is always to give your life to Jesus. And when you do that, the power of God comes inside of you and transforms you so that you can change the way you speak, so that you can change your words. And so today, if you feel far from God this morning, if there's just a weight on your shoulders, if you know that God just feels like he's a million miles away, even if you're already a Christian, but it just feels like God is a million miles away, won't you take this opportunity to invite him back inside you, to give you the power to transform you, to make you someone who speaks life. If that's you this morning, if God just feels a million miles away, you want him right inside of you to give you the power to change. Would you just slip your hand up for me? Would you slip your hand up? Great, thank you. Awesome. Anybody else? Great, thank you. Awesome. I'm going to say a prayer for those of you who did just raise your hand. Again, we say it every week. There's no magic words in this prayer. Just a simple prayer of faith. If you would repeat it after me. God, I recognize today that I'm in control of my life, not you. And I don't want it that way anymore. God, I want you to fill me. I want you to do something new inside of me. I want you to give me the power inside to be a person who speaks life today. God, begin a work in me and give me the courage and the strength to continue that relationship with you, to do the hard work necessary to become more like you every day. God, make me new. Give me hope. Give me peace. Forgive me of my sins and lift the weight off my shoulders. Give me new life today through the power of your Son, Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen.